How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Iowa State Daily Sports Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Fulmeyer. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Pavel Markovic, and back with us again is Caden Storm, our other sports reporter. So we've actually got a game to talk about finally. It feels like we've had a couple of these episodes, but no game to really dive into. We finally had that happen. Iowa State played North Dakota on Saturday, got the win 21-3. But it kind of felt like an odd game yet again in terms of like a week one game for Iowa State.
Yeah, obviously it started off with a bang with that first drive touchdown. It took only 2 plays, which is obviously none of us expected that to happen. The offensive coordinator, Taylor Mauser, really opened up the playbook right there, was aggressive to open up the game even against a team like North Dakota to really show like, hey, this is a different offense than it was last season. And, it just felt like a weird game because you don't expect Iowa State. The score is just weird. It was 21-3. Like, you don't expect that for the first game of the season, You expect, like, a team like Iowa State to, like, put up a lot more points against a non-con team like North Dakota, like you see all these other Big 12 teams doing, like, blowing out these other smaller schools. So, yeah, I would have to agree with you right there. I think it was just a little odd for this game on Saturday, but they still got the win nonetheless.
Especially when you look at how the pace of the game went, especially that second quarter. North Dakota holds the ball for a 12-minute, 23-play drive, and all they get out of it is a field goal. And that ends up being their only points of the day. But, I mean, when you go back to that first play of the game, I kind of expected just a run, a simple dump-off or something. But, no, we're going to throw it up to Jalen Knoll, double coverage, 54 yards down the field. And I was shocked when I saw that. I thought for sure it was going to be deflected, batted down, intercepted maybe. No way did I think that Jalen Knoll was going to catch that ball.
And I found it funny how we were at media availability on Tuesday, and Taylor Mauser was just right away saying he already had his finger on the second down play because he expected it to be an incompletion or something like a deflection, But, when you look at that still photo of the Jalen Knoll catch, like, it's just amazing. Like, you see where the ball is compared to where his hands, that's going towards the defender's shoulder, and he's not able to catch it. Like, his hands are, like, over here. So it was just wild to see like that first play of the game immediately just be an impact play like that.
Yeah, literally just like reaching like around the defender,
exactly,
basically hugging him and catching that ball. Knoll went on to go for 8 catches, 135 yards, and he did get a touchdown later in the game. It was Higgins who did score on that opening drive, but all of that kind of stemmed from the efficiency we saw from Rocco Becht. I really liked what I saw out of him. He had a couple miscues here and there, but threw for 20 for 26 passing, 267 yards. He had those 2 touchdowns, and he ran for another. So I was really impressed with what I saw from Rocco Becht on Saturday.
Yeah, and it's obviously now year 2 of him being a full starter for Iowa State. So I was really impressed to see what he was able to do with the ball on Saturday. And now it's just able to see what he can, if he can carry it over to the Cyhawk game, which will be crucial because that Iowa defense is unforgiving.
Yeah, that poise, the leadership that we saw out of Rocco, the trust that he has in his teammates. And again, that stems from that first play of the game, trusting Jalen Knoll to go up there and make that catch. I really liked what I saw from him. Caden, what did you think of Rocco Becht's performance?
I mean, got it off started in a big way. I think that really helped the momentum of the team. You can see like Campbell kind of hinted during the press conference after that maybe that's not the throw he should have made, but it's a throw he made. And I think it really jump-started this team. He played great. I mean, 20 for 26, 267 yards, 2 touchdowns, a rare QB sneak for a touchdown under center. He was very, very efficient. He did have some throws kind of early in the game, missing a little high, a little wide, but he seemed to dial that in. He did what they needed him to. I mean, they barely had the ball this game, it felt like, and it seems like each time he got the ball, he did what he had to do.
Yeah, especially when you kind of look at how he threw to the receivers. Knoll caught all 8 of his targets. Higgins caught all 5. Then on receiving yards wise, it was Eli Green. His first game as a Cyclone. He caught 4 passes for 44 yards, but he did have 3 other targets. A couple of those were overthrows by Rocco Becht. Maybe that's just something of like their chemistry isn't there. It's their first game together. So maybe it's something that they flush out later on throughout the season.
It's going to be bumps and bruises even in this first game. Like nothing was going to be perfect even against a team like North Dakota. Yeah. So, obviously I would like to see, we saw a guy like Eli Green step up even though he had an opportunity to get more passes thrown or caught by him, But yeah, he really stepped up to be that, like we were talking about before, that wide receiver 3 because he got 4 for 44, and I think that's really a good stepping stone for him being that wide receiver 3 and potentially for the future when Higgins and Knoll leave the program after the season.
Yeah, I did kind of want to see more from guys like Isaiah Alston, guys like Benny Nagoy. I believe that they each had 1 catch maybe. Like, they didn't really have a whole lot of production, but they didn't really get a whole lot of targets either. Yeah. And that was kind of something that I was hoping for in this game, because we know that Higgins and Knoll are going to be that 1-2 punch the entire season. So first game out, I was hoping that they would spread the ball around a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Maybe they will against Iowa. Maybe they just didn't want to show all of their cards in that week 1 game, but I don't know. And then Benjamin Brahmer also was kind of held in check all day too.
And obviously for Benjamin Brahmer, obviously when we talked to Campbell, he was kind of like dealing with some bumps and bruises going into the game. So I wasn't really expected that he was going to do a whole lot. And it seemed like he was on the field for a limited amount of time. So yeah, just going back to like Benny Nagoye and Isaiah Alston, you know, when I saw Benny Nagoye, I think Rocco Beck targeted him at least 3 times, but he obviously caught only 1 pass, and the other 2 times he seemed like he was on the other guy, like the defender's right on him. So, you know, it seemed like Rocco was trying to really target him, but he just couldn't get the ball to him really. So, you know, I'm expecting to see more for this Iowa game, to see hopefully he could get more targets, he can actually get the catches and, you know, provide a big difference.
Yeah. Caden, how did you feel about how the receiving corps did?
So obviously you have Jalen, Jaden, they're studs. I mean, they're going to get the majority of the catches, but I would like to see more production outside of them. Obviously, you get deeper into the season, you're going to get Bramer back in the mix. He's going to be healthy. He's going to get catches. But out of this receiving core, it has to be more than Noel and Higgins. It just has to be, especially when you're going against this Iowa defense. I mean, they're going to be able to lock down on those two. You got to find a third option. You got to find a fourth option, or else it's going to be tough moving the ball against them.
And then looking at other options on that offense, you get into the running back game. They were really held in check all day. Abu Sama didn't really have the game I expected him to have. He did have that 16-yard rush, his first carry of the game with the hurdle, which was really impressive. It showcased what he's able to do. But then later on in the game, gets injured. We don't see him for the rest of the game. So hopefully he's going to be 100% for Iowa. Hopefully guys like Carson Hansen can get some more carries as well in the Iowa game.
Yeah, and talking about Abu Sama, you know, it really felt like what Iowa State's first drive was, even though Abu Sama didn't have that run in Iowa State's first drive. You know, it was really explosive right away, that hurdle, obviously the highlight play. But yeah, after that, it kind of fizzled out just entirely just the run game. You know, the whole entire rushing game for Iowa State only went 22 carries for 90 yards and only 1 touchdown, which is the Rocco Beck quarterback sneak. Yeah. So, but we got to see multiple different running backs, which is the thing. So you talked about Carson Hansen, but we also got Jalen Jackson, who went 4 for 13, and then
he caught a pass too.
He did, yeah. And then Dylan Lee went 3 for 9. So, you know, we got to really see the rushing game really be spread around for more than one guy. I know you said Abu Sama did get injured, and I would like to think he would be okay for this Saturday, but you know, it's going to be interesting to see if they keep using multiple different running backs like they have against North Dakota.
You might have to, just to keep the Iowa defense on its toes. Mm-hmm. And you know, we talk about the Abu Sama injury, but on defense there is a plethora of injuries, and none more impactful than that of Caleb Bacon, who we saw out of the game early. All we know to the point right now is it was a lower leg injury. Matt Campbell did confirm on Tuesday that he had a successful surgery on Sunday. He will be out for the Iowa game. He'll be out for a couple more games after that. The hope is that he can return somewhere like later in the season, maybe second half, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, it seemed like he got injured during the punt and play when we punted it toward North Dakota in the first quarter. And yeah, all I kept seeing from when I was watching from the press box was like they kept catering to his knee, couldn't even put pressure on his leg. And that got me thinking the worst, but it seemed like Campbell said they could have gotten way worse. Like I think we would have found out if he tore his ACL by now, if he was out for the season, but it seems like he's still got a chance to come back, which is amazing news. But it'll probably have to be one of those late season acquisitions for Iowa State, which could help, obviously, because that's the late season push towards if they're contending for the Big 12 championship game and potentially if they're going to be making that 12-team playoff.
Yeah. Caden, how do you kind of assess all these injuries on how it's going to impact Iowa State in this Cy-Hawk game?
Well, yeah, that Caleb Bacon injury, I mean, I feel like that honestly could have been what kind of sucked the air out of the whole team. Maybe that's why they kind of fell flat. And then obviously Will McLaughlin didn't even play at all against North Dakota. Having both those guys out, I think you could see it in the North Dakota game. We struggled to stop the run. I mean, it wasn't great. They were ripping off runs. It feels like they had a 10-yard run each drive at least. I mean, they were ripping off big chunks. I mean, of course, we only gave up 3 points, but I know what I saw. We all saw it. I mean, we were struggling against the run. And if we were struggling against North Dakota, we still don't have our 2 linebackers. It could definitely be a problem against Iowa.
And I think that all of that kind of stems with, honestly, the fact that Iowa State does run a 3-3-5 defense. that's mostly because of the type of air raid offenses that we see in the Big 12. That's why teams like North Dakota and probably Iowa are going to have a lot of success running the football. It's just because there's not a whole lot of guys up front, not a whole lot of, and it's a depleted linebacking core now. We saw it in North Dakota. It'll probably happen again in Iowa. But what I've found kind of concerning with the Caleb Bacon injury is kind of how it was concealed in a way, because all we know is it was a lower leg injury. We don't know exactly what it was, how it happened, what happened, the extent of the injury. Rocco Becht is a roommate with Caleb Bacon. He went to see him in the hospital, and Rocco really had no idea what was going on either. All he knew was it was a lower leg injury.
And obviously they're going to be doing this kind of stuff where they like seclude the information because they don't want people like overreact and say like the actual injury. Like they're going to make it as like less detail as possible. Like my lower leg injury, like that's pretty much all you're going to hear. So, I mean, it's kind of no surprise that they're going to be like talking like about injuries like this because they don't want to like, you know, freak the people out, like the fans, like be like, oh no, he potentially tore his ACL. Like, you know, you see in the NFL where you just right away get to the point like, oh, he's done for the season. But here, like, I'm assuming they did this for Bacon because they know he's going to come back, because they would have just said, I think right away, yeah, he's done for the season. So, you know, I think it will be fine in terms of like, in terms of injuries. It just had the next man up mentality, especially in the linebacker room.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys who can definitely rise up into those roles. One guy specifically that I was looking at was Jacob Ellis, who had like 3 or 4 tackles in the North Dakota game. He's the third one in line behind Will McLaughlin. So I think that he could be a guy that could maybe step up and do some things. Jack Shadowski was the second listed linebacker behind Cooper Ebel, so maybe he can rise into a bigger role again this season. That's a room that I am going to be like lasered in on watching in this Iowa game.
You talk about players to watch. Yeah, it's just the entire linebacker room. And then another guy you didn't mention was John Klosterman. You know, Matt Campbell really praised what he did on Saturday. You know, he got tackle for a loss and the QB hit that eventually ended up in for the ball that ended up in Bo Freeler's hands for that lone interception for the game. So yeah, this linebacking room is going to be like, this is going to be the biggest test of the season, no doubt, just because it's a team like Iowa that can make you pay for if you don't play well.
Yeah. And then going away from like the linebackers, the secondary really performed very well. Like you said, Bo Freeler had that interception. He nearly had a second one. Jontez Williams, I was kind of surprised that he led the team with 11 tackles. That was really nice to see. He also almost had a pick six. It just fell out of his hands. So close there. But I really liked what we saw out of the secondary against North Dakota.
And it kind of was expected that the secondary was going to play well. You know, we had kind of playmakers already from that last year defense. I think the only guy we really lost was TJ Tampa.
Right.
But that was expected because he was out of eligibility and would end up in the NFL. So, you know, seeing like a guy like Jontez really step up in the next roles, the corner is really huge. And especially that'll be huge for Iowa, knowing that they could shut down that offense. And then you see guys like obviously Bo Freeler and Jeremiah Cooper, they're expected to play well at the safety position. You know, they have been. And it was nice to see even like guys like Malik Verdon, like he got 9 total tackles. He's right behind Jontez Williams in the tackle department. So, yeah, I think it was a great game all around just for the cornerback position.
I guess you kind of have to assume that they would get a lot of tackles though, because of how long North Dakota held the ball.
Yeah.
I mean, nearly 40 minutes they were on offense. And the fact that they were able to finally lock down, only gave up 3 points the entire game, I think it shows a testament to what this defense is capable of. And it was kind of iffy at times, but overall I'm really glad with how the defense played. Caden, how would you kind of assess like that secondary and just the defensive performance as a whole?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the secondary was definitely the bright spot of the day for the Cyclones. You look down at just like the tackles list. You got Jontez Williams, Malik Verdon, Bo Freeler. Those are the top 3 tacklers on the team, which might not be a good thing. That kind of goes back to the struggling against the run a little bit. But then you just look at the passing stats for Simon Romfo. I mean, he only averaged 4 yards an attempt. He was 17 for 30, but everything that he completed was more lateral, nothing down the field. Every time he tried to go down the field, I mean, he had no space. Our defensive backs were locking him down, and they were coming up on that lateral stuff and knocking him down quick. They weren't letting screens break for 10 yards. They weren't letting these lateral bubble passes get out and break away. I mean, they're very sound tackling, great coverage. I think the defensive backs were definitely the stars of the show on Saturday.
Yeah. And I really think just one other thing for the defense. What really interests me was later after the post game. Like, we talked to the defensive players. They seem not satisfied with only giving up 3 points. I think mainly the frustrations come from giving up that 23 play drive. You want to get off the field, let your offense go back on the field and do their thing. But, they only giving up 3 points. You think, yeah, this is a good day. You've only given up 3 points to a team like North Dakota. But, they're not satisfied. They're hungry for more. And that's what makes me excited for Saturday against Iowa. Like, I feel like they're really going to bring the presence against Iowa, really make Cade McNamara's day hell on the field. And I'm excited to see what that defense does.
A lot of that on that drive was that North Dakota was able to get into third and short situations and just run the ball and convert on those. And it really just showed that the run defense isn't really there right now. And when you go to a team like Iowa, you have to have a run defense there because they have a huge offensive line. Caleb Johnson is a fantastic running back. It's going to be tough to stop Iowa when it comes to the run. But again, when you go back to Ramfo and his performance, that was his first ever start at the quarterback position. And it's tough when you go against a secondary like Iowa State's that has so many playmakers and is so experienced that it kind of seemed like it should have happened that he didn't perform well throwing the football. He didn't throw any touchdowns. He threw a pick. He didn't have that great of a completion percentage. But it's something that I think he can build on and take this experience against this Iowa State secondary and say, okay, this is what I did wrong. Here's what I can do to make it better. Not that we're, North Dakota reporters or anything, but that's just kind of what I was seeing from him in his first start ever.
100%. Obviously, like I think I've talked about this before, North Dakota was going to play a big team like Iowa State, one of these bigger conferences. And I think Ramfo knew going into it, like, yeah, this is going to be my first year. I got to face off against a good defense. I got to really step up. And I know he had some good moments in that game, but still, it's a lot to be improved on. And I know he will be able to improve this season in the Missouri Valley because I know North Dakota does have some playmakers that could help them win in the future.
Yeah, but overall, just a weird game, pacing-wise. Iowa State somehow gives up only 3 points. They get the 3 touchdowns. Player of the game, if you had to pick one, who would you say it would be?
I mean, it's either Rocco Becht or Jalen Knoll for me, but they kind of seem intact, like one punch, 2 punch, because obviously Rocco, we talked about him being efficient, only overthrowing a couple passes, still throwing for 267 yards and 2 touchdowns, along with finding his main receiver in Knoll with 8 catches, 135 yards, and the touchdown score. Like, I'd have to say both of those guys combined. I couldn't really pick one because they're both were efficient. They were able to produce when they needed to, and obviously resulted in the win.
I would take Bo Freeler as my player of the game, the defensive captain. The fact that he was right there to get an interception, got reversed to hit the ground, and then later on, like a drive or two later, he does end up getting one. I think that shows a lot about his poise, his determination, and his willingness to make a play on this team. Caden, who would you say your player of the game was?
There's a few players I'd be between, Rocco, Jalen Noel. You just mentioned Bo. I'd also throw out Jontez Williams, but I think I am going to go Noel. I mean, that catch I think might just be my tiebreaker to start the season. I mean, that was great. 8 catches, 135 yards, a touchdown. The opening catch is so sweet. I got to give it to him.
Yeah, that was obviously definitely one of the best catches I've ever seen.
That's a Sports Center catch right there.
Yeah. So now that the North Dakota game is in the rearview mirror, let's kind of take a look at how Iowa is looking as we prepare for another edition of our annual Cyhawk game. So last week, Iowa really surprised me. 40-0 over the other ISU, Illinois State. It started kind of slow for the Iowa offense, but they really turned it on in the second half and just really ran away with this thing.
Yeah, it seemed like Iowa really took control of this game, even without their head coach, Kirk Ferentz, because of some recruiting issue over the offseason. But still, obviously, this is expected that Iowa was going to beat a team like Illinois State, the other ISU. So, just looking at what Iowa did, Cade McNamara wasn't great, but, he still got the job done. 21 for 31, 251 passing yards and 3 touchdown passes. And it seemed like what they really did was lead from the run game because Caleb Johnson really just dominated the ground game because he had 11 carries, 119 yards, and 2 touchdowns just from the ground. So, it kind of, because we talked about how Iowa State's run defense kind of got gashed, that's the one guy we got to worry about for Iowa that could cause some problems for the Cyclones.
Yeah, but Caleb Johnson actually wasn't the running back that had the most carries, though. That was Kamari Moulton, who ended up with 19 carries for 65 yards. Didn't have that good of an average per se on his yards per carry, but that 1-2 punch is definitely going to be something that Iowa State might struggle with at times in the game, especially seeing which linebackers are going to be the ones to step up. There's probably going to be a lot of switches at that position for Iowa State until they figure things out. And another thing that I thought was actually pretty interesting or crazy, Cade McNamara throws 21 for 31, 251 for yards, and 3 touchdowns. All the touchdowns were to receivers, which tied their total to touchdowns to receivers in all of last season. So Iowa played 14 games last year or something crazy like that. 3 touchdowns to receivers all year. This year in game 1, they throw 3 touchdowns to receivers. So maybe this offense is starting to actually figure things out for the first time in 2 or 3 years.
You hope that's not the case because, obviously we don't like the Hawkeyes to succeed, but maybe it is a different year for the Hawkeyes. So, and, with this offense, I think they're in a new regime because Brian Ferentz did leave. So, it's interesting to see what they're going to be doing this general season because, they're playing in the expanded Big Ten. They're obviously beat down a team like Illinois State already. So they got a little bit of hype going into not just Saturday, but, for just the rest of the season to actually make a difference other than their defense, of course.
Caden, I know you have some pretty interesting thoughts about this too.
I think you guys are getting way ahead of yourselves. I mean, this was Illinois State we're talking about here. They did score 40 points, which is probably about 25 more than what they averaged last year, which is a good change of pace for them. But yeah, I mean, they looked competent, so that's good for them, I guess. They threw the ball downfield, which is something they haven't been able to do since before Petrus was their starting quarterback, it seems like. The receivers did get involved for the first time probably since before Petrus as well. I mean, I think Lester, their new OC, has done a good job. They look like not a 1930s offense anymore, maybe more like a 2002 offense. Still very I formation, stretch, run heavy, but I mean, it's the best their offense has looked in years, and that's not even a joke. It's Illinois State. It is the best their offense has looked in years, but they're not facing Illinois State next week. They're facing a good defense. While injured, it's still a good defense. So we'll really see how good this offense is next week.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it. But then looking at Iowa's defense, they were really able to hold Illinois State in check all day. Only gave up 56 rushing yards, 133 passing yards. So you've kind of got to look at it. Okay, Iowa State's, on defense, Iowa State struggled against the run. Iowa succeeded running the football. On the other side of the ball, Iowa State could not run the ball against North Dakota, and Iowa handled Illinois State rushing-wise. So those are 2 matchups that are probably going to be a little bit lopsided, especially looking at the formations that each of these teams run. Like Caden was saying, Iowa running the big I formations, that's not going to match up well against the 3-3-5 defense that Iowa State runs.
Yeah, it's not going to look good for Iowa State. And they really just got to make these adjustments during the game. Like, you're going to see, obviously, during the game that they're going to be running these packages, and they just got to learn how to beat them and adjust to them and just make it work.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of looking at the rest of things, this is going to be the second game between Rocco Becht and Cade McNamara. When you look at last year's game, kind of that comparison, percentage-wise, they were pretty similar. McNamara threw 12 of 22. Rocco Becht doubled that, almost perfectly. Yeah. 23 for 44. Both of them threw a pick, but I think that Rocco's was a little more killing, I guess is the type of word, because it was the pick 6 and Iowa ended up winning the game by a touchdown.
Yeah, that pretty much was the dagger in the game that Iowa State, Rocco Becht threw to still the corner for Iowa, Sebastian Castro, so he will face him part 2. Hopefully he doesn't have to throw a pick 6 to him again. But, that pick 6 was really just the killer in the game, honestly, because, obviously Iowa still went up 17-3 at halftime, and all hope was kind of dwindling from there, even though they kind of tried to come back at the end, in the fourth quarter, but it still didn't matter because it was kind of a too little, too late situation. So hopefully they don't have to play from behind from this Saturday. They should be able to get in front of them early and be able to hold them so they can pull out the win again.
The problem that really spoke out to me in last year's game was the fact that Iowa State, with 7 minutes to go or something like that, down 20-6, and you take a 5-minute drive down the field to score a touchdown, and you give yourself like under 2 minutes to try and go out there and get another touchdown. That can't happen this year for Iowa State. If they want to beat Iowa again, it can't happen. And part of the problem is because in years past, we've seen these Matt Campbell teams play to the pace of Iowa. It's all about controlling the pace in these types of games, controlling the line of scrimmage, controlling the play. If Iowa State can go out there in the first quarter and really command this game, not play Iowa's brand of football, make Iowa play Iowa State's brand of football, the Cyclones could be in a good spot this year.
Yeah, you don't want to make them play their brand of football. You want to make them play what you want to play.
Yep.
Like, hopefully we see more of what we saw from the North Dakota game, that first drive. More explosive plays that get Iowa on its toes. Like, oh, no, this isn't the team we're expecting. They wasn't going to be, like, slow drives, maybe a lot of punts and stuff. So, hopefully that playbook by Mauser gets really opened up against the Iowa defense.
Mm-hmm. Caden, what did you kind of see last year, and what are some things you're going to be watching this year with some of these returners on both Iowa and Iowa State?
Yeah, I mean, last year, this game was Rocco Beck's real. I mean, it was his real first game. I mean, he played against UNI the week before, but that was UNI. This was Iowa, and you could tell. I mean, he was a little frantic in the pocket. Mm-hmm. He was trigger happy. He threw that pick six, which is a backbreaker, but this isn't Rocco Beck's first game anymore.
Yeah,
I think he's going to be a much more poised, much more comfortable quarterback back there. And you mentioned that 5-minute drive near the end of the game. How much of that had to do with Rocco Beck just not being comfortable, no huddle in that raucous environment,
Yeah.
not having everything down with his receivers. Also, we saw last year, the workhorse in that game was Cartavius Norton, 21 carries.
Mm-hmm.
Abu Sam only touched the ball 8 times. That's going to be much different. Mm-hmm. I think Abu Sam is going to get a lot, as long as he's healthy, which seems like he is for the most part. He should be good to go. I think he'll get a lot of carries. And one thing I really want to point out, look at the receiving stats from that game. What does it look like?
It looks like something that we're going to see this year. Higgins and Knoll each with 8 catches.
And then no one else with more than 2.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing we need to switch up.
Yep.
Because Higgins and Knoll can get theirs, and we can still lose, as we've seen. Yeah. We need to get more people involved. Hopefully we have Bramer back and full ready to go. We get him some touches. Green, Alston. I mean, anyone. We need to spread the ball around so Iowa just can't focus in on a couple of receivers. That's how they create turnovers. That's how they get big plays on defense. Got to keep them on their toes.
Yeah. Look at the game plans that Campbell and Mauser probably came up with in the North Dakota game. They obviously didn't want to give Iowa a lot to work with, and maybe that's why we didn't see the other receivers besides Higgins and Knoll, guys like Green, Nagoy, Alston. Maybe that's why they didn't have as much of a presence in that game. Mm-hmm. Maybe they were waiting for this Iowa game to say, okay, Iowa has seen Higgins and Knoll before. We're going to save these guys, give them a little taste of what's to come in week 1, and then against Iowa, maybe now is their time to start to get some real production out there.
Yeah, I think they executed the playbook really well, like that game like talking about. Just, obviously first drive, you're able to see, like, this is like a different offense. Like you can talk about, like, there is potential here. It's not like going to be like no normal Iowa State offense. But then after that, I think their plan was just to really run the ball down North Dakota's throats. And yeah, it did work out, obviously. But, obviously we'd like to see more rushing yards from the game, from the running back room. But still, it's going to be different just to see what they do against Iowa because, it's going to be a different game plan, obviously, because they wanted to be very vanilla with their playbook against North Dakota. But now that you're playing Iowa, you want to really open it up and show that you guys have what you've been waiting for, planning for all this whole offseason.
It'll be tough, though, because Iowa's defense is always really good. They're always so, determined and just together. They seem like a unit that seems unstoppable year after year. And it's impressive that they're able to keep that up. So when you kind of look at it that way, how do you handle Iowa's defense? Like, how do you go about that? What needs to happen in this game to have Iowa State score the ball, push the ball down the field? Like, what do you think are some things that they probably need to do?
Well, obviously, number one, establish the run game immediately. So they only get 50, 60 rushing yards on 33 carries to a team like Illinois State. Given it's a team like Illinois State, but still, you got to command that running game immediately because, they're going to take advantage if you can't get it established, like, especially late game. If you need the running game, they're just going to shut you down right away, and we're going to have nothing. It's going to rely wholly on the receiving game and Rocco Becht, and that could cause some mistakes. So I think number one has to be establishing that run game. Abu Sama, whether it be him or Carson Hansen or Jalen Jackson or even Dylan Lee, like anyone in that running back room, hopefully they're able to break off some big runs and really establish that running game. And then obviously, just making the right plays. Rocco Becht went 23 for 44. He missed on 20, what is that?
21
passes.
Yeah,
21 passes last year. And
which is almost the amount that McNamara threw in total last year.
Exactly, yeah. And that's, it's a wild stat to say, of course. But, obviously we wouldn't like to have that efficiency. That wasn't really efficient. Throwing 44 passes but only completing 23 of them, that's not really an efficient game. So, obviously we like to see more efficiency out of him against a better defense now against the Hawkeyes on Saturday.
Another thing that I would like to point out with this Cy-Hawk game that we see every year is there's always some stupid, wacky, how did that happen type of play. Like last year, there was the pick six, there was a missed field goal. We've had blocked punts.
Punts off backs.
Yeah, punts off backs, running into your own teammate and losing the game that way. 99-yard drives. Anything can really happen in this game. And I think that you've got to be ready for just any situation that happens out there.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to prepare for those wacky scenarios because, they just happen out of nowhere. Obviously, the first drive from Iowa State last year, blocked field goal. Yep. So, that's just unprepared for. You think, it's going to be a normal field goal, but nope, it's blocked. There's always something that's going to happen. I like to assume there would be, but because if there's not, it's not a normal Cy-Hawk game, I'd feel like. But, I feel like it's going to be a tightly contested game just in general this Saturday because, these past Cy-Hawk matches, they've always been kind of close, tightly knit, even though Iowa has pulled out in the majority of them. So, I think Saturday will be kind of the same story. Hopefully Iowa State doesn't make that. They hope they just blow them out, but I don't think that's expected to happen with this Hawkeyes defense.
Caden, how do you feel about all that?
Yeah, this game's weird every year. There's been plenty of years where it's hard to say that Iowa State's not you feel like they should be the better team towards the end of the year, but Iowa State under Matt Campbell just kind of struggled early in the season, and it's very unfortunate to have this game in week 2, but there's no excuses. You got to play the game, you got to win. Yeah, if they can just avoid that catastrophic play early in games, or I guess any time during the game, I mean, that's been able to flip probably the last 4 or 5 results, just one play, when you really think about it. I mean, without that pick six, who knows what happens last year? Obviously, without that running into each other on that punt, who knows what happens when game day came to town a few years ago. So it's just about avoiding those catastrophic plays. Just being fundamental, not doing dumb things, Play like how you'd play against any other Big 12 team. And I think if Iowa State can do that, if they can keep their heads on straight, it's anyone's ball game.
Pavle, give me one player on Iowa and one player on Iowa State that you're going to have your eye on.
Okay, so Iowa State, it has to be Abu Sama. I talked about earlier, establishing that run game. I'd like to see more out of him. Hopefully they're able to get over 100 yards rushing on that Hawkeyes defense, but, I'm not so sure of that because they only gave up 56 to Illinois State. Yeah. And last year when they played Iowa State, they only gave up 90. So, I mean, they could, but, I'd like to see Abu Sama really because, he didn't really have a great game against North Dakota. I'd really like to see him have this good game against Iowa. And then for the Hawkeyes, it'd probably have to be, I don't know, I'd probably have to say Sebastian Castro for the Iowa defense. The defensive back, he's always been good. He got 3 tackles against Illinois State this last Saturday. And, he was that one guy, like I mentioned, he got that pick six against Rocco Becht. That really was the dagger in that game last year. So it's going to be interesting to see, because obviously now with talking about the Iowa defensive backs, they lost Cooper DeHaan to the NFL. And now it's kind of see to him if he can step up for the Iowa defense. And it's looked like so far, he only had 3 tackles, but still I'd expect him to have a decent game because he's also going to be going against Higgins and Knoll once again like he did last year.
Yeah. So for Iowa State, I'm going to take the entire linebacking core. We've talked about him a lot today, but really I'm just going to look at who are 1 or 2 guys that can step up there. Because we know that Bacon and McLaughlin are out for the game. So it's going to be, like we've said, next man up, who's going to take charge in that. And then on the Iowa side, I'm going to look at the receiving core. I'm going to take Reese Vanderzee. He had 2 touchdowns last week against Illinois State. I know that Iowa State's secondary is really good, but this guy could be a problem handling him the entire game.
And I like to think, Brett, if you had to pick a specific linebacker from that linebacker room from Iowa State, who would you choose? Out of all the options that Iowa State does have available for Saturday, what would be one guy that you choose?
So, like I said, I want to see something out of Jacob Ellis. I think he had some promise in the North Dakota game, but I'm actually going to go with Jack Shadowski because he's listed second to Cooper Ebel on one of the outside linebacker positions. Maybe they move him over to the other outside linebacker spot and he gets a start this year. So I hope that Shadowski I hope he records some pretty good stats in this game. That's who I'm going to keep my eye on for the linebacking core. Caden, who do you have as your players to watch?
For Iowa State, I'm going to go with Ben Bramer. Like I said earlier, you're going to need a third option. It can't be all Higgins and Noel. Hopefully, if he's back ready to go, healthy, full go for this game, he needs to be that safety blanket for Rocco. He needs to be that third option. You can't have these Iowa defensive backs who are turnover hungry, just jumping on two receivers the whole time, because that's how turnovers happen. Got to have that third option. Got to have that safety blanket. So that's why I'm going with Ben Bramer for my player to watch for Iowa State. And then for Iowa, I'm going to go with Aaron Graves, their big defensive tackle up the middle. We talked about our running woes kind of last week. He's the guy that if we're not going to be able to run it again, it's going to be because of him. He's a great defensive tackle, big boy up there in Iowa City. We got to be able to move him. Our centers, our guards, got to be able to push him off the ball. If we can do that, I think we can run the ball. We have much more success. But if he's causing problems, then it might be a long day.
Score prediction?
21-17 Clones.
Okay. Probably.
I'm going to have to go with last year's score, 20-13. Unfortunately, favorite towards the Hawkeyes. How about you, Brett?
See, I would like to pick Iowa State, but I just feel like because it's in Iowa City, because Iowa is trying to defend their home field, they lost there last time this game was played in Iowa City. Looking at the depletion on the linebacking core of Iowa State, how Iowa's offense looked in week 1, I think it'll be a close game. It'll probably be decided on the last drive, like it almost always is with this game. But I'm going to take Iowa in this one 23-20. I would like to be wrong, but at the same time, I don't want to be wrong.
Of course, yeah. Obviously, we'd like to be wrong. We'd hope the Cyclones can win this game like they did 2 years ago. But then again, 2 years ago was, the weather conditions made it kind of a wonky game. Ended a 10-7 score that really came down to the last drive too. But I obviously like to hope that Iowa State could pull it out. And Iowa City, just like you said, like the linebacking core and just the Iowa team in general, they're just. I'm looking at just the past in terms of Cyhawk matchups, and just like Iowa's been dominating us this entire time, and it's kind of hard to pick Iowa State when this team has in a sense owned us as a Bears fan. I guess say owned, owned this team for the longest time. So I unfortunately have to pick the Hawkeyes, but I hope we're wrong. Obviously, we like to see Iowa State pull out this one and start the season 2-0.
One thing I think is interesting when you look at this matchup and how it kind of goes through the rest of the season, when Iowa State, like the few times they've been able to beat Iowa, they usually are in for a bad season. They're not making a bowl game. They're winning like 3 or 4 games. When they lose to Iowa, like we saw last year, they make a bowl game. So I don't know. Maybe that'll be the same. Maybe if Iowa State does pull out this, I would say an upset win, looking at the rankings, looking at how these teams are, maybe they could end up going to a bowl game this year. I think the schedule can line up that they could, but we'll have to wait and see how things play out this Saturday. So now, wrap up. We'll kind of look at some other Big 12 games around the country this week. Starts on Friday, BYU on the road against ACC school SMU. 2 religious institutions taking on each other in this one. I like SMU by a lot in this one. I don't think BYU is that good. No,
I have to agree. BYU has to travel to the ACC team, SMU. I know I have to keep mentioning that, but, it's just weird. But, obviously SMU has already played 2 games. I know Nevada was kind of a close win by 5, but then they blew out Houston Christian. So, I still like SMU's team to take down BYU on Friday night.
So, this SMU team's weird. I thought they were kind of an ACC sleeper maybe before the season. But that game against Nevada was rough. Nevada's probably going to be one of the worst Power 5 schools. I mean, FBS schools in the country. And yeah, they blew out Houston Christian, but that's Houston Christian. I mean, I think BYU, I mean, the number is 11.5 in favor of SMU right now. I would like BYU to keep it closer than that, I think. I just can't. SMU looks so bad against Nevada. I just can't trust them.
And then after that, we'll move to Saturday. Starts at 11 a.m. We've got a big game. Oklahoma State, ranked 16th in the country, takes on the SEC's Arkansas. Oklahoma State's favored by 7.5 right now. I kind of thought that would be a bit higher in favor of Oklahoma State, considering they're ranked. Arkansas wasn't expected to be that good this season, and it's in Stillwater, this game. I like Oklahoma State in this game.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I like Oklahoma State just because, I know Arkansas blew out Pine Bluff 70-0, but that's Pine Bluff. That's not no like big team. Yeah. So, now they're going to have to play a team like Oklahoma State in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So I really like, just because what Oklahoma State was able to do. I know they still gave up 20 points to South Dakota State, but I'm expecting a guy like Ollie Gordon, who's contending for the Heisman, to really break out a lot of big runs against this Arkansas defense.
Yeah, on this one, I think I also have Oklahoma State to win for sure. I think it might be closer than you guys are leading on, but yeah, I mean, Arkansas blew Arkansas Pine Bluff, like you mentioned. That's not very impressive. 70 points is kind of cool, though. But other than that, not much to take away from that game from Arkansas. They're not supposed to be that great this year. I got Oklahoma State, but I'd say it's about around a 10-point game.
Yeah, and then moving into the next game after that, same time on Saturday will be Kansas State at Tulane. So that will be an interesting matchup, especially knowing Tulane in the American Conference can be a team that could give some teams some fits, especially like Kansas State. And, in this matchup, honestly, like it's going to – I feel like Kansas State will win, obviously, but I think Tulane is going to give them a run for their money, especially being in New Orleans. I think the line right now is -9, so I think Tulane should be able to cover +9 for sure.
Yeah, these teams played last year. I forget who won. I don't think it really matters. But we did see Tulane. Gosh, was that last season when they played?
It was
2 seasons.
2 years ago, Tulane beat Kansas State. Then Kansas State went on to win the Big 12.
That's right.
Correct.
Yep. And then that was, I believe, the same year that Tulane played USC in that New Year's Six Bowl and beat them by like 1 point.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be in for a good game here, but I do like Kansas State in this one. I just think they're a better team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also like Kansas State here. I like Kansas State. That sucks to say as an Iowa State guy, but I think Kansas State is a good team. I think Avery Johnson's going to be good this season. This Tulane team is not the Tulane team of 2 years ago when they had Michael Pratt and Tajay Spears. I don't think Tulane's going to be the group of 5 representative at the playoff this year. I don't think they're that top tier of group of 5 team. I think Kansas State beats them, and I think it's by more than 9. I think it's by at least 2 touchdowns.
Then our final game of the early window, 11 o'clock start times, Pitt versus Cincinnati. This one seems pretty interesting to me. Both of these teams started off 1-0. I don't think that they're going to be that great in their respective conferences. Cincinnati's favored by 1.5, but this game seems fun to me because this is an old Big East rivalry that's going to be renewed this season.
You always like those old rivalries to be renewed. But yeah, just talking about Pitt and Cincinnati. Pitt took down Kent State 55-24, and then Cincinnati took down Towson 38-20. And obviously it'll be nice for both teams. Get this opportunity to get another win, especially knowing like they're probably not going to do much in their respective conferences this year. So, honestly, I'm gonna stick with the Big 12 opponent if I were to choose. I'm gonna stick with Cincinnati at home because I like what Brendan Sorsby did. He threw for 383 yards and 2 touchdowns in their win against Towson. So, I'm going to go with the Bearcats here in this game.
Yeah, I'm going to be keeping my eye on this one too because Iowa State does play Cincinnati again this season in Ames. It's in Ames, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Ames, yeah.
I wanted to make sure
Cincinnati, this year Ames,
Yeah, but I'm going to take Cincinnati in this one.
Pittsburgh beat Kent State 55-24. 24. Did I get that score correct?
Yeah, 55-24, yeah.
Kent State's very bad.
Yeah.
They're not good. Cincinnati beat FCS Towson. I don't think either of these teams are going to go bowling this year. Sorry to say to Bearcat and Pittsburgh fans, but I think I'm going to roll with Pittsburgh. I don't think Cincinnati's going to be very good this year, and I think they might be at the bottom of the Big 12.
Then after that, we roll into this technically is a Big 12 game, but it's not going to be listed as a conference game. Baylor at Utah. This game was on the schedule last season, they played in Baylor. This season, it was scheduled as a non-conference game. This was before the fallout of the Pac-12. So, yes, they are in the same conference, but no, this will not be counted as a conference game. As it stands right now, Utah favored by 15. I think that's pretty fair. I don't think Baylor is going to be that great this year. Yeah, give me Utah by probably 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I have to agree Utah by at least 2 touchdowns. I think Baylor will struggle immensely against this Utah team, especially with it being in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And, talking about just like these weird quote unquote non-conference games, because it's apparently not a conference game, even though it's a Big 12 matchup. I'm pretty sure UCF plays TCU next week, and it's technically not a conference game either. So, it's just odd, but it's also really fun to see these teams be able to face off against each other for the first time. So, yeah, I know Utah, I feel like just going to take advantage of Baylor's mishaps and just beat them down.
Yeah, there'll be another game like that too, like K-State versus Arizona or something. There's another Big 12 versus Pac-12 school that was scheduled, but they'll play, but it won't be a conference game. Caden, any thoughts about Baylor, Utah?
I think Baylor is getting a little ridden off as just one of the bottom feeders of Big 12. I don't think that'll necessarily be the case. I think they could compete for bowl eligibility. I mean, this league is such a crapshoot, honestly. It's honestly kind of a random number generator who's going to win week to week. But Utah is one of the top 2 teams, in my opinion, in this league.
Oh, yeah.
And 15 as the line is close. I could see them winning by 14, call the dogs off a little bit. But it's at home in Salt Lake City. I'm going to take Utah to cover those points.
We'll kind of rattle off the next few here. Iowa State, we touched on a lot already. We'll circle back to them at the end. West Virginia hosts Albany. West Virginia is going to roll probably.
Yeah, especially it's in West Virginia.
They did lose to Penn State last week, but I think this will be a good bounce back game for West Virginia. Then we've got UCF hosting Sam Houston State, who is pretty new to the FBS level, level of football. I'm going to take UCF in this one. They should be pretty good this year.
Yeah.
Then we get later into the evening. Number 19, Kansas goes on the road to Illinois, Big 12 versus Big 10 battle. This one should be pretty fun. I do like Kansas to win and cover that 5.5 point spread.
Yeah, I'm honestly going to say that Illinois covers the 5.5 point spread. I feel like it's going to be like a field goal game because I think, Illinois is able to smack Eastern Illinois 45-0, and they obviously, it's Eastern Illinois, and then Kansas beat down Lindenwood 48-3. But looking at just in general, Jalen Daniels for Kansas, he went 9 for 15, 148 yards passing, 1 touchdown, but also had an interception against Lindenwood. So, that doesn't really give me a lot of optimism in terms of Daniels' passing game against Lindenwood. But obviously, the first game of the season wasn't going to be perfect. That was the time to have mistakes, if anything. So, but I think Illinois is going to really put Kansas to the limit, but I think Kansas will win just barely by a field goal.
Yeah, don't sleep on the Illini this year in the Big Ten. I think they could be a bowl team, but give me Kansas. We need it for the Big 12.
Yeah.
Then after that, all eyes are going to be on this one. Colorado travels to Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska to take on Nebraska. An old Big 12 battle. Colorado back in the Big 12. I'm excited for this one. I don't really like either of these schools, but I'll keep my eye on this one. Nebraska's favored by 7.5, which I think is pretty interesting. They do have Patrick Mahomes dupe as their quarterback.
Yeah.
I think Colorado has probably arguably the best player in the country in Travis Hunter. He showed that in week 1 against North Dakota State. They did struggle in that game, but obviously North Dakota State is a fantastic team in the FCS level. I am going to take Nebraska in this game. I think it'll be close, maybe 3 or 4 points.
Yeah, I think the whatever the line was, I think -7.5 in Nebraska. Yeah. I think that's too big. I think, this Colorado team, obviously a lot of hype around them year 2 with Shedeur, Travis, and the coach Deion Sanders, of course. But yeah, I mean, we saw last week against North Dakota State, they struggled to run the ball. Only their leading carrier was Hayden with 9 carries for 20 yards. So it's going to be a struggle for them to face Nebraska, their defense. So I'm really thinking that Nebraska will win, but I think Colorado's going to be able to keep it competitive just from their offensive game from Sanders and Hunter.
I'm going to disagree with you guys here a little bit. I don't think the line is big enough.
Really? Big enough?
I think Nebraska rolls Colorado. I love Shedeur Sanders. I love Travis Hunter, but that's about all I love with this Colorado team. Their defense looked atrocious last week against North Dakota State. That's a team that we thought was just going to try to run the ball, keep the game at a slow tempo, but North Dakota State was throwing the ball all over the field, and it seemed like at points last week. I don't like this Colorado team. I don't like their defense one bit, besides Travis Hunter, obviously. And, Dylan Raiola might be a poor man's Patrick Mahomes, but a poor man's Patrick Mahomes is still a pretty good quarterback. And I think this Nebraska offense is much better than they were last year. And I think they'll put up tons of points on this Colorado defense.
I think the fact that the game is in Nebraska is kind of what sets me over the edge of Nebraska is going to for sure win this game.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be packed to the brim. Memorial Stadium, those Nebraska fans always bring it. So, yeah, it's going to be loud. It's going to be a fun game to watch. It obviously is the game. My thoughts, it's going to be the game of the week.
A few more games to go over here. Houston takes on Oklahoma. This was a Big 12 matchup last season. Oklahoma's in the SEC now. Oklahoma is the home team for this one. This one's going to be interesting because I don't remember if they played each other last year as Big 12 opponents. Yeah. But, yeah, I think this one's going to be interesting. Oklahoma's favored by 29. Makes sense. Houston's not really going to be that great this year. Yeah, it's going to be an odd game.
Yeah, I'm not going to be really surprised. I think everyone else is either. This is going to be a smackdown laid by the Sooners. As much as we don't like Oklahoma, it's going to happen because, Houston couldn't even beat a team like UNLV hosting them last weekend. And you think they're going to go to Oklahoma and beat the Sooners? I mean, crazy things have happened, obviously. Yeah. But, Donovan Smith, their quarterback, did not look good in that game. Only went 15 for 30, 135 yards, and threw 2 picks against UNLV. The rushing game, only 17 yards by their leading back. And Oklahoma, I feel, is just going to shred them. Like what Caden said for the Colorado game, I don't think this line's big enough. I think it's going to be like what you expect from like one of those big school against a non-con team. Like I feel like it could be that level of like scoring. Like we could see Oklahoma reach 50s, 60s. I feel like in this game just because of how bad Houston is this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about a bad look for the Big 12 last week. I mean, Houston, we can't be doing that against UNLV. Mm-hmm. I think this line's begging you to take Houston because you think 28 points, that's a football score right there. But like Pavle said, these are the type of games where I think, even going back like to the Lincoln Riley era of Oklahoma, when Oklahoma gets up against a bad team, they like to put up 70 points. They like to put up 60 points, and they're going to do it if they can, and I think they can. I think they win this game by 30 plus.
Then we got a couple that are probably going to be some blowout type of games. TCU hosts Long Island. Arizona hosts Northern Arizona. I expect TCU and Arizona to roll in these games.
100%.
Then we get down to our final two, the nightcaps. Texas Tech travels to Washington State.
The Mike Leach Bowl.
Leach Bowl, true.
Mike Leach Bowl, yeah. That one should be fun just in that aspect of things. I hope that each team comes out with a tribute to him. I think that'd be really cool to see. But, Washington State representing what is left of the Pac-12.
Pac-2.
This one should be interesting. Should be close. Spreads Washington State favored by 2.5. Mm-hmm. I am going to take Texas Tech, though.
Mm-hmm. The points, or you just have them winning?
I have them winning.
Okay.
Right.
So, yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I feel like Texas Tech will be able to pull it out. And I think, what they did against Abilene Christian, that was not necessary to go into overtime with a school like Abilene Christian and barely pull out the 1-point win. But, looking at Washington State, too, they scored 70 on Portland State, but they also gave up 30 points. And, both quarterbacks were able to throw 5 touchdown passes in that game. So, this is one of those sneaky games. Like, obviously Colorado, Nebraska is the game to watch. But, this one could be like one of the ones that, like, not people really expect, but could end up being one of those, like, throws to watch, especially what Texas Tech did last week. I think it's going to be one of those, like, close games that could end up going to overtime, in my opinion.
Yeah, Texas Tech, they won last week, but was it really a win? Letting Abilene Christian score 51 points. That you can't be having that. Mm-hmm. We can't be doing that in the Big 12. Give me Washington State. 9:00 game in Pullman. I don't have confidence in Texas Tech after what I saw last week.
I think their offense is going to be able to turn around. I think that this is a get-right game for Texas Tech. Mm. You can look at it like, okay, we nearly blew it. We nearly had like a awful loss. Now you've got an opportunity against a Power 5 team in Washington State. And when you look at these two teams, all that they're really probably going to be fighting for is a bowl game this year. Let's be real. Washington State's not going to make the playoff or anything. That's really because they are in a 2-team conference. But yeah, I'm going to take Texas Tech in a get right game in this one.
Yeah, 100%. And then we move into the final game of that Saturday slate for the Big 12. Mississippi State traveling to Tempe, Arizona to take on Arizona State. And, the line has Arizona State favored -6 in this game. But, I know Arizona State did lay the smackdown on Wyoming 48-7. But I feel like Mississippi State is going to take advantage of this Arizona State team, because they weren't really expected to come into this Big 12 being one of those really good teams, one of those top contenders. So, in my opinion, I feel like Mississippi State is going to take advantage, led by former Baylor quarterback Blake Shapen now. So, yeah, give me Mississippi State to beat Arizona State.
Mississippi State, another Mike Leach team.
Yep, the Mike Leach team. We're just talking about Mike Leach today.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, R.I.P. Mike Leach, the Pirate. Gosh, this game sucks. These are like two bottom feeders in each of their conferences, man. Like, I don't want to pick either of these teams. I guess I'm going to go with Arizona State just because they're at home, but I wouldn't be shocked if Mississippi State pulls off this win. This is a gross game. This is the type of game you'd expect, Pac-12 after dark.
Yeah.
But now it's going to be Big 12 after dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be watching it, though.
Caden?
Yeah, I have no vibes, on this game at all. I feel like Arizona State might be feeling more positive. Maybe they're getting their program turned around a little bit. They did find a spot in the Big 12. Mississippi State, they have a new coach in Jeff Lebby. They're not expected to be any good this year. Obviously, you can tell they're not favored against Arizona State. I guess give me Arizona State. I mean, yeah, Big 12 after dark, that'll be fun, I guess. But I'll probably be finishing up watching the Washington State-Texas Tech game while this is going on. So maybe it'll be a good game to watch. Turn on around 12:30 at night.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be watching it pretty late. Probably one of the few games that we get to watch because we'll be going to Iowa City this weekend for, like we talked about before, the Cy-Hawk game, Iowa State. Going to be this Saturday from Iowa City, 2:30 p.m. It should be a packed house like it always is. But I think what's really cool is that this game is going to be on CBS, national TV. Brad Nessler, the big crew, is going to be on this one. So that should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are as well. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. We'd appreciate it. And we will see you next time after the Iowa State game. See ya.